The planet of Cryon was a shimmering jewel in the vast expanse of the galaxy, its surface perpetually cloaked in crystalline ice that refracted light into an ethereal dance of colors. The air itself seemed alive with frosty currents, carrying whispers of ancient secrets through the frozen valleys and towering spires of translucent glaciers. Here, beneath layers of glacial formations older than most civilizations, lay the heart of an empire built upon millennia of tradition and unyielding protocol. At the center of this frozen realm stood Princess Ira, born of the royal bloodline that had ruled Cryon for countless generations. Her beauty transcended mere physical form. Her skin held the iridescent sheen of freshly fallen snow under starlight, while her eyes captured the deep blue hues of glacial crevasses. Yet it wasn't just her appearance that commanded attention. It was the way she carried herself with an elegance that spoke of centuries of refined grace, each movement precise and deliberate, like the delicate formation of ice crystals in perfect symmetry. Ira's upbringing had been as meticulously crafted as the intricate ice sculptures that adorned the palace halls. From the moment of her birth, she had been groomed to embody the essence of Cryonian royalty, stoic, composed, and unwavering in duty. Her education encompassed not only the sciences and arts but also the complex tapestry of diplomatic relations between Cryon and other interstellar powers. Every lesson reinforced the importance of maintaining emotional control, for in Cryonian culture, outward displays of feeling were considered signs of weakness, particularly for those of noble blood. The princess moved through her days surrounded by attendants who ensured every detail of her life adhered to royal standards. Her chambers sparkled with ice crystal chandeliers that cast rainbows across the walls, yet they felt more like gilded cages than living quarters. Each morning began with ritualistic precision, meditation in the sub-zero gardens, followed by hours of council meetings where she learned to mask her thoughts behind a perfectly composed expression. Even her rare moments of leisure were structured affairs, with carefully orchestrated entertainment designed to reinforce her understanding of proper royal behavior. Despite her privileged position, Ira found herself increasingly suffocated by the weight of expectations. The constant surveillance, the endless ceremonies, the perpetual need to maintain an impenetrable facade, all these elements wove themselves into a gossamer prison more confining than any physical barrier. Her closest confidants were chosen not for genuine connection but for their ability to uphold protocol and provide suitable companionship for a future queen. Every aspect of her existence was choreographed to perfection, leaving little room for personal desires or authentic emotional expression. Yet beneath this polished exterior beat a heart yearning for something more, though she scarcely allowed herself to acknowledge it. The icy corridors of the palace echoed with memories of childhood dreams long since frozen away, replaced by the cold reality of her royal obligations. As she navigated the labyrinth of court politics and diplomatic engagements, Ira often found herself staring out at the endless white landscape beyond the palace walls, wondering if there existed worlds beyond Cryon where beings lived without such rigid constraints on their emotions and freedoms. Commander Marcus Hale's journey to Cryon began not with grand ambitions of diplomacy or conquest, but rather with desperation born from Earth's dwindling resources. The human vessel Odyssey had limped through space for months, its crew surviving on minimal rations while searching for viable planets to establish new colonies. When their sensors detected the unexpected warmth signatures beneath Cryon's icy surface, it seemed like fate had finally smiled upon them. What they hadn't anticipated was how their arrival would disrupt the delicate balance of Cryonian society. Marcus had spent years commanding rescue missions across the galaxy, his rugged features weathered by countless spacewalks and solar storms. His dark eyes, framed by lines earned through hardship, held the weary wisdom of someone who had witnessed both humanity's darkest moments and its brightest hopes. Unlike many of his fellow officers who maintained pristine uniforms and practiced military decorum, Marcus wore his experience like a second skin. His jacket often left open at the collar, his boots scuffed from practical use rather than ceremonial polish. When the Odyssey first established contact with Cryon, Marcus had been skeptical of the planet's seemingly perfect order. Everything about the Cryonian transmissions spoke of precision and control, mathematical patterns so exact they bordered on artificial. Yet as negotiations progressed, he began to notice subtle anomalies in their communications. There were moments when responses would lag, micro-expressions visible even through the digital interface that suggested hesitation or doubt. These observations fueled his instinct that beneath Cryon's glittering surface lay complexities waiting to be understood. The human delegation's initial meetings with Cryonian officials took place in sterile conference chambers where temperature controls struggled to accommodate both species' needs. While his colleagues focused on resource-sharing agreements and technological exchanges, Marcus found himself drawn to the cultural implications of their presence. He watched how Cryonian dignitaries maintained strict emotional distance, their movements calculated and precise, reminiscent of carefully programmed automatons. This absolute control over expression fascinated him, especially when contrasted with humanity's tendency toward raw, unfiltered emotion. As weeks turned into months, Marcus became increasingly aware of the growing tension between the two species' approaches to interaction. Human scientists openly expressed excitement during joint research sessions, their voices rising in animated discussion. In response, their Cryonian counterparts would retreat further into formal protocols, their responses becoming increasingly measured and distant. Yet despite these challenges, Marcus sensed potential for genuine connection, if only both sides could find common ground beyond their differing social constructs. His interest in Cryonian culture extended beyond professional curiosity. Late at night, when the diplomatic discussions concluded and the official channels fell silent, Marcus would study recordings of Cryonian ceremonies and historical documents. He noticed patterns emerging, the way certain gestures were repeated in formal settings, how specific color combinations appeared during significant events. Most intriguing were the rare archival images showing ancient Cryonian gatherings where expressions seemed more fluid, suggesting that their current rigid protocols might be a relatively recent development in their long history. This growing understanding of Cryonian society placed Marcus at odds with some members of his own crew, who viewed the planet's inhabitants as overly formal and emotionally stunted. But Marcus recognized something deeper, a civilization that had perhaps sacrificed emotional freedom for stability, much like how humans sometimes traded personal liberties for societal security. This parallel between their cultures, though expressed in vastly different ways, convinced him that meaningful dialogue was possible if approached with patience and genuine respect. The intersection of their paths came unexpectedly during a ceremonial function meant to celebrate the signing of preliminary trade agreements. The grand hall of the Cryonian palace sparkled with crystalline lights, its walls pulsing with refracted illumination that made the very air seem alive with color. Marcus stood near the perimeter, observing the formal exchange between dignitaries, when he noticed her, Princess Ira, moving through the crowd like a figure carved from moonlight. Something in her bearing caught his attention, a subtle tension beneath the practiced grace that no one else seemed to notice. Protocol dictated maintaining distance from the royal family, but as the evening progressed, Marcus found himself increasingly drawn to the princess's isolated position. She stood apart from the main gathering, her hands clasped tightly before her, watching the proceedings with an expression that revealed nothing while somehow suggesting everything. When a sudden power fluctuation caused minor chaos among the assembled guests, Marcus saw his opportunity. Moving quickly to prevent anyone from slipping on the momentarily slick floor, he reached out instinctively as Ira's footing faltered. Their hands met in that instant, and time seemed to fracture around them. Marcus felt the shock of contact like an electric current. Her skin was cool, almost unnaturally so, but beneath that chill ran veins of warmth that spoke of hidden fire. For Ira, the touch shattered centuries of conditioned restraint. The human's firm grasp, so unlike the careful, distant interactions she was accustomed to, sent waves of unfamiliar sensation coursing through her body. Her carefully constructed composure began to crack, tears welling unbidden in her eyes as emotions long suppressed surged forward. Around them, the room seemed to hold its breath. Cryonian nobles froze mid-conversation, their eyes widening in collective horror at the unprecedented display of vulnerability from their princess. Marcus, sensing the gravity of the moment, didn't release her hand immediately. Instead, he tightened his grip slightly, anchoring her against the tide of social expectation threatening to overwhelm them both. The princess's tears fell silently, tracing glittering paths down her cheeks, each drop catching the light like tiny stars. What passed between them in that suspended moment defied simple explanation. To Marcus, it felt like touching something profoundly ancient yet achingly familiar, a connection that transcended species and protocol. For Ira, it was the shattering of invisible chains, the first taste of freedom in a lifetime bound by duty. Their hands remained joined longer than protocol permitted, longer than either of them intended, as if breaking contact would sever something vital that had just begun to form. The reaction from the assembled guests was immediate and palpable. A ripple of disapproval spread through the hall, manifesting in stiffened postures and sharp intakes of breath. Yet amidst the mounting tension, something remarkable occurred. Several younger Cryonian nobles exchanged glances that hinted at shared understanding, their expressions softening as they observed the princess's unguarded moment. Marcus, still holding Ira's hand, felt the weight of countless eyes upon them but refused to look away from the princess's tear-filled gaze. As the initial shock began to settle, Marcus noticed subtle shifts in the atmosphere. Some of the older council members moved to intervene, their faces masks of controlled outrage, while others hung back, their hesitation speaking volumes about internal divisions within Cryonian society. The princess's attendants hovered uncertainly at the edges of the gathering, torn between their duty to intervene and an apparent reluctance to break the spell that had fallen over the room. Through it all, Ira remained rooted to the spot, her breathing shallow but steady, her free hand pressed against her chest as if trying to contain the storm of emotions unleashed by that single touch. The aftermath of their encounter unfolded in waves of controlled chaos throughout the palace. Protocol demanded immediate separation following such an unprecedented breach of conduct, yet neither Marcus nor Ira moved to comply. The princess's tears had dried, leaving trails of crystalline residue on her cheeks that caught the light like scattered diamonds. Around them, the diplomatic assembly dissolved into whispered debates and furtive glances, creating an atmosphere thick with unspoken implications. Councillor Vren, the eldest member of the Royal Advisory Board, stepped forward with measured steps, his ice-blue robes whispering against the frozen floor. His voice cut through the murmurs like a blade slicing through silk, demanding that appropriate measures be taken to address this affront to Cryonian tradition. Yet his words lacked their usual authority, betrayed by the slight tremor in his voice and the way his gaze flickered between Marcus and the princess. It was clear that this incident had shaken even the most steadfast believers in Cryonian protocol. Marcus felt the weight of scrutiny pressing against him from all sides, but his focus remained fixed on Ira. Her expression had transformed from vulnerable openness to something more complex, a mixture of defiance and determination that seemed to solidify with each passing moment. The human delegation, gathered near the chamber's entrance, exchanged anxious looks, their diplomatic training warring with the instinct to support their commander. Ambassador Lorne, the senior diplomat, began edging forward, ready to diffuse the situation through official channels, but Marcus raised a hand imperceptibly, signaling him to hold position. Throughout the hall, subtle shifts continued to occur. Younger Cryonian nobles, previously known for their strict adherence to protocol, began clustering together in small groups, their body language betraying a mix of fascination and rebellion. They watched the scene unfold with expressions that ranged from barely concealed admiration to thoughtful consideration. Some of the elder statesmen attempted to restore order, calling for immediate action against this violation of custom, but their voices carried less conviction than before. The foundations of Cryonian society, built on centuries of rigid control, seemed to be trembling ever so slightly beneath the weight of this singular moment. Ira's attendants formed a protective circle around their princess, though their movements lacked the usual precision of royal protocol. Several of them exchanged glances that spoke of divided loyalties, torn between their duty to uphold tradition and a growing recognition of something potentially transformative occurring before their eyes. The air itself seemed charged with possibility, each frozen particle vibrating with the tension of change looming on the horizon. As minutes stretched into what felt like hours, the dynamics of power within the chamber continued to shift. Some of the more progressive Cryonian officials began cautiously approaching Marcus, their questions veiled in diplomatic language but clearly probing for understanding of this unprecedented situation. Meanwhile, traditionalists retreated to the chamber's periphery, forming tight clusters where heated but muted discussions took place. The very architecture of Cryonian political structure appeared to be responding to the pressure of this moment, its crystalline foundations groaning softly under the weight of potential transformation. In the midst of this unfolding drama, Marcus became acutely aware of the larger implications of what had transpired. This was no longer merely a personal connection between two individuals from different worlds. It had become a catalyst for something far greater. The way Ira stood beside him now, her posture straight but her expression softer than he'd ever seen, suggested that the princess herself recognized the magnitude of what they had initiated. Around them, the carefully ordered world of Cryonian society continued to ripple with the aftershocks of that single, forbidden touch. The days following the incident transformed the palace into a crucible of conflicting forces. Marcus found himself summoned repeatedly before various councils and committees, each session more intense than the last. The questioning ranged from clinical examinations of protocol violations to deeply personal inquiries about his intentions toward the princess. Yet through every interrogation, he maintained an unwavering stance, not of defiance, but of genuine conviction that what had occurred between him and Ira transcended mere diplomatic incident. His answers, delivered with characteristic directness, often left Cryonian officials visibly unsettled, as if encountering a perspective that challenged fundamental aspects of their worldview. Ira navigated her own trials with increasing complexity. Her private quarters became both sanctuary and prison, as advisors and counselors rotated through endless attempts to guide her back to proper royal conduct. Traditionalists argued for severe measures to restore dignity, while more progressive voices suggested leveraging this incident to modernize certain aspects of Cryonian protocol. The princess listened to these debates with growing frustration, her mind replaying the moment of contact with Marcus again and again. Each recollection brought not shame, but a strange sense of liberation, as if touching the human commander had awakened dormant parts of her consciousness that now refused to be silenced. Their secret meetings, arranged through sympathetic attendance and discreet signal exchanges, became the foundation of a growing revolution. In shadowed corridors and forgotten chambers, they exchanged ideas about emotion, governance, and the nature of true leadership. Marcus shared stories of Earth struggles with balancing individual freedom against societal needs, while Ira revealed the hidden history of Cryon's gradual shift toward emotional suppression. These conversations sparked something unprecedented, a fusion of perspectives that neither had anticipated but both desperately needed. The impact rippled outward through Cryonian society. Young nobles, inspired by glimpses of the princess's vulnerability, began testing boundaries in subtle ways. A junior ambassador allowed himself a genuine smile during negotiations. A court musician incorporated minor key changes into traditionally rigid compositions. Each small act of authenticity created cracks in the crystalline structure of Cryonian protocol, letting in shafts of light that illuminated possibilities long buried beneath layers of tradition. Even some elders found themselves questioning whether absolute emotional control truly served their people's best interests. Yet with each step forward came new challenges. Formal protests erupted from conservative factions, demanding immediate expulsion of all human visitors. Security measures tightened around the palace, making clandestine meetings increasingly dangerous. Whispers of conspiracy filled the air, linking the incident to larger questions about Cryon's future role in galactic affairs. Marcus and Ira found themselves at the center of a storm that threatened to reshape not just their personal destinies, but the very fabric of Cryonian civilization. Through it all, their connection deepened in ways neither science nor protocol could fully explain. Physical contact remained rare but profound, each touch revealing new dimensions of understanding between their species. Marcus discovered that Ira's physiology responded to emotional stimuli in ways that suggested a sophisticated adaptation to extreme environments, while Ira learned that human emotional expression wasn't merely chaos but a complex system of its own. These revelations added scientific weight to their relationship, providing rational justification for what increasingly felt like an inevitable union of minds and hearts. The palace itself seemed to respond to the changing dynamics. Ancient ice formations shifted imperceptibly, releasing trapped sounds and memories from Cryon's past. Servants reported hearing music in empty halls, seeing fleeting shadows that didn't match their own. The very air grew heavier with anticipation, as if the planet itself awaited resolution to the conflict brewing within its heart. Each day brought new developments, new alliances forming and old certainties crumbling, until the line between personal drama and societal evolution blurred completely. As weeks turned into months, the situation escalated beyond the confines of the palace. News of the princess's unprecedented display of emotion spread through Cryonian society, carried by servants, guards, and visiting diplomats who couldn't contain their accounts of what had transpired. The initial shock gave way to widespread debate, with citizens gathering in public forums, both physical and virtual, to discuss the implications of their royal family's vulnerability. Traditional media outlets maintained strict neutrality, but underground networks buzzed with speculation and analysis, dissecting every known detail of the incident between Ira and Marcus. Within the scientific community, the encounter sparked intense interest in human Cryonian biological compatibility. Research teams began examining archived data on interspecies interactions, uncovering patterns that suggested previous instances of emotional breakthroughs had been systematically suppressed or misinterpreted. The medical establishment, long focused on maintaining emotional equilibrium through chemical regulation, faced growing pressure to reconsider treatment protocols. Young physicians and researchers, inspired by the princess's example, started advocating for studies on the physiological benefits of emotional expression, challenging centuries-old assumptions about mental health and societal stability. The economic sector experienced its own upheaval. Trade agreements with Earth, once negotiated through layers of diplomatic protocol, now proceeded with unprecedented efficiency. Human traders and Cryonian merchants found themselves engaging in more direct, emotionally honest negotiations, resulting in mutually beneficial arrangements that surpassed original projections. This success story created a schism within Cryonian business circles, with older companies clinging to traditional methods while newer enterprises embraced the evolving paradigm of emotional transparency in commerce. Cultural institutions underwent perhaps the most dramatic transformation. Artists who had previously worked within strict guidelines of acceptable emotional representation began experimenting with new forms of expression. A renowned sculptor unveiled a series of works depicting figures in various stages of emotional release, causing such controversy that the exhibition had to be relocated multiple times. Musicians incorporated dissonant harmonies and unpredictable rhythms into their compositions, arguing that these elements better capture the complexity of authentic feeling. Even the sacred rituals of the state religion began to show signs of adaptation, with younger priests incorporating moments of genuine emotional connection into ceremonies that had remained unchanged for centuries. In the diplomatic sphere, the incident forced a re-evaluation of Cryon's relationships with other worlds. Ambassadorial corps found themselves fielding inquiries from numerous planets about the nature of emotional expression and its role in governance. Some neighboring systems viewed Cryon's evolving stance with suspicion, concerned about potential instability, while others saw opportunities for more meaningful alliances. The princess's brief moment of vulnerability had inadvertently opened doors to deeper interstellar connections, challenging long-held beliefs about the necessity of emotional restraint in diplomatic relations. Meanwhile, the military establishment grappled with internal conflicts regarding appropriate response protocols. Commanders trained to maintain absolute emotional control in combat situations began questioning whether this rigidity might actually hinder effective decision-making. Training programs started incorporating scenarios that required emotional intelligence alongside tactical expertise, leading to heated debates about the future of Cryonian defense strategies. Young officers, particularly those who had interacted with human personnel, advocated for reform, while veteran leaders resisted changes to time-tested methods. Perhaps most significantly, the incident catalyzed a grassroots movement among Cryon's younger generation. Social media platforms lit up with discussions about emotional authenticity and personal freedom. University students organized peaceful demonstrations, not demanding radical change but rather incremental evolution in social norms. These gatherings attracted attention from across the galaxy, with observers noting the unique blend of traditional Cryonian discipline combined with newfound emotional openness. The movement's leaders deliberately avoided confrontational tactics, instead focusing on constructive dialogue and mutual understanding, an approach that resonated deeply with both conservative and progressive elements of society. As these changes swept through Cryonian society, Marcus and Ira found themselves at the nexus of increasingly complex dynamics. Their relationship, once a singular point of contention, had evolved into a symbol of potential reconciliation between tradition and progress. The human delegation, initially concerned about diplomatic fallout, now found itself courted by various factions seeking guidance on emotional integration. Earth's representatives walked a delicate line between supporting their commander's position and maintaining broader diplomatic objectives, their strategy adapting daily to the shifting landscape of Cryonian politics. The nights became longest for both protagonists as external pressures mounted. Ira's chambers, once sanctuaries of solitude, transformed into command centers for managing the crisis. Sleep eluded her as she processed reports of social unrest, scientific breakthroughs, and diplomatic developments, each requiring careful consideration against the backdrop of her growing connection with Marcus. The human commander, accustomed to facing challenges head-on, discovered that this situation demanded a subtlety he hadn't fully anticipated. His quarters filled with data streams and communication requests from Earth, Cryon's government, and concerned parties across the galaxy, each message adding layers to an already complex situation. Between them stretched a network of secret communications, encrypted messages exchanged through quantum-entangled devices provided by sympathetic scientists. These exchanges carried more than just words. They conveyed the weight of decisions that would shape not only their personal futures but potentially the course of two civilizations. Each message required careful crafting, balancing the immediacy of their connection with the broader implications of their actions. The stress manifested differently in each of them. Ira's typically flawless composure showed occasional cracks, while Marcus's usually steady demeanor occasionally gave way to bursts of frustrated energy. Their stolen moments together became both refuge and crucible. In these encounters, They shed their public personas, allowing vulnerability to surface in ways that shocked even themselves. Ira discovered reserves of strength she hadn't known existed, while Marcus found depths of patience he'd never needed before. Yet with each meeting came the awareness of time slipping away, of decisions that couldn't be postponed indefinitely. The weight of expectation from both their peoples pressed down on them, a shared burden that paradoxically drew them closer while complicating their path forward. The palace itself seemed to conspire against their rest, its crystalline structures amplifying the tension through subtle vibrations and shifting light patterns. Servants moved through the halls with purposeful haste, delivering messages and retrieving documents that documented the expanding crisis. Security measures tightened around key locations, creating an atmosphere of controlled chaos that seeped into every corner of their existence. Even the natural rhythms of Cryon's environment seemed disrupted, with unusual weather patterns reflecting the turmoil within its society. As dawn approached too quickly after each fraught night, both Marcus and Ira faced the challenge of maintaining their respective duties while navigating the emotional maelstrom of their connection. Official functions required them to maintain appearances, to play their assigned roles with convincing authenticity while their true feelings churned beneath the surface. The strain showed in small ways, a momentary hesitation in Ira's usually fluid movements, a slight roughness in Marcus's typically smooth diplomatic speech. These imperfections, barely noticeable to outsiders, spoke volumes to those who knew them best. Their separate worlds collided in unexpected ways during these long nights. Ira's intimate knowledge of Cryonian protocol clashed with Marcus's pragmatic approach to problem-solving, creating friction that sometimes sparked brilliant insights and other times threatened to derail their efforts entirely. They learned to navigate these differences, finding strength in their contrasting perspectives while struggling to reconcile fundamentally opposing worldviews. The process exhausted them physically and emotionally, yet neither could imagine turning away from the challenge they had undertaken together.